Hi everyone, I'm Rachel. I'm the founder of Our Remedy, and I'm talking today to a very good friend of mine called Maria, but you'll probably hear me refer to as Madge because that's what she's known as. Madge and I met at university, so quite a long time ago now. But she's recently gone through a very difficult and traumatic time, and she is coming out the other side of it now. She feels ready to share her story, particularly because it's Mental Health Awareness Week, and she really hopes that it might actually end up helping somebody else who's suffering. So at Our Remedy, we feel really passionate about encouraging this kind of conversation just to raise some awareness. It could affect anyone. And hopefully this conversation, even though her story is going to be very difficult to hear, we both really hope that by having this chat now, it might help someone and also might remind somebody to check on their friend, even if they do say they're okay. So this is all because it's Mental Health Awareness Week. So Maria. Hello.
Hi.
And welcome to the Our Remedy chat. So first of all, we met at uni, which was a really long time ago now.
God, I think it was 2007.
Yeah, so that makes us feel old, but our friendship has really stood the test of time. So we're still sat here today, which is great. And you've got 2 children?
I do. So I've got a little boy called Theo, who's 3, and Max, who's 1.
And we were pregnant at the same time as well. So I was pregnant when Madge was pregnant with Theo. So that was amazing.
There's only a couple of months between them, isn't there?
Just a couple of months, which is lovely as well.
So nice.
So first of all, talk us through your birth and your pregnancies.
Okay, yeah. So my pregnancy with Theo was great. It was the sort of the textbook first pregnancy in the sense that you're excited, everything sort of went well, I wasn't ill, I was just really looking forward to having my first baby. Towards the end though, I must say it got a little bit strenuous in the sense that by the time I got to 40 weeks, he was measuring quite large. And Theo was actually born at 42 weeks and a day in the end, and he weighed 11 pounds and I had him naturally. So so it was quite a hard birth, particularly as I had to be induced, but he came out, he was fine. I was okay. He did have a birth, I don't really know what they call it, but it was called shoulder dystocia. So the process of him coming out, his shoulder got stuck behind my hip bone. So there was a little bit of an emergency there, but everything was fine. So first pregnancy, first birth was quite hard, but the pregnancy was lovely. Yeah, and then I guess with Max, he was, my mental health as well, I just want to put here, was fine in that sense. So I was feeling pretty normal, I guess, as any normal like a first time mum, really.
I remember we met up very early on. When you had just had Theo, and you were like completely fine.
No, absolutely fine. I think you just sort of get accustomed to your new sort of your new job. It was tiring, but I was fine mentally, still working, it was, everything was fine really. Bit of healing, but all good. And then I fell pregnant with Max by sort of surprise really. We weren't quite ready to start trying, but ultimately it happened quite quickly. And the pregnancy itself was okay up until about 26 weeks pregnant. Things started to change for me mentally, and basically I started hearing a voice, and this voice just came from nowhere. I initially thought it was somebody like around me, which sort of got my paranoia up a little bit, but it would just say horrible things to me. So it would tell me that I'm a bad person, a bad mum, a bad friend, a bad wife, and it was constant. It wasn't my voice. It sounded like a man's voice, in all honesty. but I couldn't tell anybody, because I thought, if I say I'm hearing a voice and I know it's not somebody, it's in my head, I know they're going to think I'm mad. And I tried to battle this, and I lived with it for about 10 days just by myself. And then everything just changed completely for me. So I remember the night I was making a spaghetti bolognese, just a standard dinner for Theo and for Mike. And Mike just came in and said, "Do you want me to cut up an onion?" And with that, I just collapsed to the floor and was hysterically sobbing, to the point where I believed that I wasn't even good enough to cut up an onion and make the spaghetti bolognese. Mike, in that moment, had confirmed that voice that I'd been living with for 10 days. And from then on, I just blundered into the deepest, darkest depression. Gosh, I can't. It started really, I refused to cook anymore. I didn't cook. I refused at point blank. I would start to not want to get out of bed. I stopped speaking to friends and family. Just couldn't be around anybody. I started feeling really panicky all the time, to the point where I would make myself vomit or have diarrhea, because I would just be so anxious to go out of the house. And Ray, I mean, I don't know if you would agree, but I know if I'd asked anyone else, I've never ever been like that, ever. I've always been quite a confident person, and I've never had an issue with my mental health. I've never really experienced proper anxiety before. I seem to take things like that in my stride. And even just trying to get out of my front door, I couldn't even do it. I just couldn't do it. I mean, it still I can remember the feeling of how I felt. Mike was starting to get a bit worried about me, because I just couldn't function, really. I stopped washing. I couldn't look past anything that would take me longer than a couple of minutes. So getting into a shower and washing my hair was just too overwhelming for me. I couldn't physically do it. And I think the longest I went, actually, without Mike having to pull me into the shower and drag me in, was about 6 to 7 weeks where I didn't wash.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I just couldn't. I physically couldn't. It was horrendous. It was really awful. So I was seeing a consultant at the time for my pregnancy, but her appointments were sort of every 4 weeks. And during this 4-week period, she obviously hadn't seen me, and it was a battle getting to the hospital. And I had a panic attack the whole way. It was horrendous. I honestly nearly turned around. I couldn't go. But I got there, and Mike was like, "You have to go and see her. She needs to see you the way you are at the moment." Yeah. And I sat there, and I just couldn't even look at her. I was grey. That was the first thing she said to me. I was completely grey. I had lost any interest in my baby and my bump. I couldn't communicate with her, in the sense that I just didn't care about a single thing. I didn't want my baby anymore. At this point, I just didn't really want to be around. But that hadn't really solidified until a little bit later on. But she was very, very concerned, this consultant, and said to me that she wanted me to go and speak to the perinatal psychiatrist, and that he had a 9-month waiting list, but she was getting me in that day. So she was very, very concerned. And fortunately, I did get to see him. And it was a very hard appointment. I've never seen a psychiatrist before, ever. And they are they're fantastic at what they do, but they ask some very hard-hitting questions that if you're not used to it, it's really it takes you back a little bit. And he was asking me basically what was going on, and I told him how about this voice that I'd been hearing, how I just didn't feel like I was good enough for anybody, and what was the point of living. And he basically said to me, well, why haven't you committed suicide yet? Wow. And I was like, whoa, okay. And I said, well, I haven't committed suicide yet because I've got like a 2.5, 3-year-old here that I need to look after. And Theo at that point was my rock, really. He was the only thing that was keeping me kind of afloat. So from there, they decided that I should take some medication, and I was a little bit reluctant to do it, and I didn't know why, because at that point I didn't really care for the baby, so it wasn't really what impact would these tablets have on the child. But I just didn't think I'd ever be a person that took antidepressants, to be honest with you. And I kind of felt like there was a little bit of a stigma attached to it. But he said to me that if I didn't, there would be a much more severe consequence if I didn't take these tablets. So, and it would get worse and worse and worse. So he said to me, you've got to take it. There's no question really about it. And he said, on the probability, your baby will be absolutely fine. It's more you that we're worried about. So you need to take these. And it was sertraline that they gave me to begin with. And it was quite a small dose. So I started taking it. And I remember the first time, it must have been about 3 days into taking this medication. And I laid on the sofa, and my auntie came, took Theo out for a walk for me, because I couldn't function with him. I would literally let him eat McDonald's and watch whatever he wanted to every day. Because that was all I could physically function to do, because I couldn't even butter bread to give him a sandwich. So I laid there on the sofa, and it was the first time I thought about overdosing and killing myself. And it was really vivid. And I remember getting really upset, because I have never, ever, ever thought about killing myself before, or even hurting myself. I've never even had that come into my mind. And I laid there and I thought about it, and I thought about taking all my tablets, and I thought that it would be easy, because my auntie could walk in, find me dead, and then that would be fine, and then it would all be over. I rung Mike straight away, and I was like, this can't. I was just so scared that I'd had this for. I said, what am I going to kill myself? What was going to happen? And he was like, no. He said, you've got to be open, keep talking. You've just got to keep telling me all of the feelings that you're having. And he is fantastic, really, throughout this whole thing. So I got back in touch with the psychiatrist, and I said, I'm having thoughts about hurting myself now. Which I came to realise is actually quite a common symptom of this medication. So actually your symptoms of depression can actually spike, it can increase before they start to get better. So I was then put on, I was actually then referred to the perinatal team, and they give you a 24-hour around the clock care. And at this point, things just got even worse than what they were. I constantly thought about hurting myself all the time. I couldn't stop thinking about hurting myself. I used to think about cutting myself, like bleeding out. I remember I then became obsessed with trees. So where I live, there's a nature reserve just in the back of it, and it's beautiful it's beautiful unless you're but it's not great when you're feeling suicidal at all. So I became so obsessed with trees and hanging myself that I started studying the trees a lot. and finding out which tree would be the best one to use.
Was you looking it up online, or was you just thinking it over in your head?
So I was actually going out and seeing the trees in the nature reserve. So I was actually like feeling the branches. I used to like literally stand up and see how far off the floor I would be. It was so real. And at this point, I'm now getting on to, oh gosh, I must have been about 32 weeks pregnant at this point. And they just kept increasing my dosage of this medication. And when I told them about the tree obsession and that I couldn't stop thinking about hanging myself, they prescribed me a medication called quetiapine, which basically they give to people with schizophrenia, but also to people who are having sort of as a basically they give it out to people who require a mood stabilizer in sort of a smaller dosage. And I started on that. I started on a 50 milligram dose, and then eventually by the end of it, I ended up going up to about 500 milligrams. I was on such a high dose of it eventually by the end. But the first time I took that, it was amazing because it just knocked me out. It just knocked me out, and that's what I needed. I needed sleep.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was, oh God. But
do you think during this time any of your friends and family noticed it? Obviously you said Mike, your husband, but what about any friends or anyone like not so close living with you?
Yeah, so my mum knew something wasn't right. A lot of my friends started picking up on it because I refused to go out. I refused to meet them. I refused to see anybody. I sort of became distant on WhatsApps and also sort of phone calls and things like that. I didn't really want to engage. I let a few friends, I mean, there was three friends that I actually let come in and come over and see me when I was feeling really ill. And they probably saw quite bad, like how bad it got, in that sense. But ultimately it was Mike and my mum and my sister that like really understood the sort of the severity of it, I think.
So would you say rather than saying you were fine to people, you were just ignoring people, you just weren't engaging?
Yeah, I refused to engage firstly, and I started to say I was fine, and then it became too much to even say I was fine. And I would look at people, if somebody asked me if I was okay, I'd look at them and be like, no, I'm really not okay. But there's no way I can sit here and tell you what's going through my mind right now. Yeah, it was such a hard time. I mean, I remember one night, and this was just before I was about to have Max. So the consultant had decided that I would have to give birth. I'd have to have a planned C-section at 37 weeks because ultimately I couldn't really carry on with the way that I was living.
And I was being pregnant was causing it, and when you had the baby it should stop.
Yeah, exactly right. So they very much said I had antenatal depression, so something that you get when you're pregnant, and just an imbalance of hormones. And hopefully if the baby comes out, hormones get back to normal and you sort of feel a little bit better, so you'll be a bit more back to yourself. So they wanted to sort of bring Max out a little bit earlier via planned section. But at that point, I was so set on killing myself that I told my husband, I made a deal with him actually. I said to him that I planned the night that I wanted to kill myself just before the section. But Mike said to me, look, Max has done nothing. Like the baby is so innocent in all of this. Just give me the baby and then we can talk about how you know, what you want to do with yourself. So that was my sort of my plan with Mike at that point. I gave birth, and fortunately it was weird. I say fortunately now, but obviously it wasn't. But he was quite unwell to begin with, and he had to go to HDU, so the high dependency unit, because his breathing was a bit off. And I remember feeling so relieved that I didn't have to mother. He literally had to go away, and I was laid there with this, I couldn't move my legs because I'd had the spinal. And I was able to say, oh, my baby's somewhere else because he has to be there, It's not, I haven't chosen to have this done, but it was such a surreal time. And even at that point, I still wanted to die, very much so.
So the feeling didn't stop even though you had Max?
Not straight away, I'd say after I had Max, I'd say that after about a week, things got really, really good, like amazingly good, to the point where I got Max a passport by the time he was 10 days old, and I was about to book a Caribbean cruise for us all to go on holiday. And Mike was just like, why are you doing this? Like, you couldn't even leave the front door literally a week ago, and now you want to go around the Caribbean. And I was like, yes, I do. I just want to live our lives, and I just want to carry on. And ultimately, there was nothing could stop me from doing all of this. I even said, I took him in at 7 days old to get the passport photo, and the man was like, this is the youngest baby I've ever photographed. Yeah. I also took the boys to London. Max was 10 days old, I think. And decided that Madame Tussauds was where they wanted to go on the busiest day ever. I remember the day so vividly, and I was so unwell. Now I look back on it, but we couldn't take the pram round, and we had all our coats and our bags and everything, and I had to carry Max all the way around, and I carried 2 backpacks and all of the coats, and just walked around like a zombie, literally. It was just horrendous. Like, so I became like really, really high in that sense, for the first sort of, after a week until about, I would say about 5 weeks. So for about a month, I just lived a bit crazily, really. I did other things. I remember taking the boys by myself to soft play in Banbury, which is another sort of town about sort of 10-15 miles away. And I would never have done this before I had Max. When I was feeling unwell, absolutely not. And I remember egging Theo on to go down this really big slide, and bearing in mind he's only little, and I was really egging him on, and I had Max in my arms, and obviously a tiny little baby, and he was so scared. I could see Theo's face, he was so scared, but I was going, come on, do it, it's gonna be amazing. And he fell down this slide, and he'd smashed all his face in. His nose was bleeding. His eyes, when he looked up at me, were just completely black already. And I stood there and just laughed at him. I thought it was funny. I actually thought it was funny. I picked him up, and a couple of the other mums that were there were like, is everything okay? And I was like, yeah, it's fine. And I remember sort of looking at him in the car, and he had like a tissue around his nose, and his eyes were black. And I thought, I'm going to have to take him to the hospital. I'm going to have to. So I drove him to the A&E, and I came with Max. And I just turned up to A&E. I had no bag for Max, nothing at all. I had no food for him, no milk, no nappies, nothing. And I hadn't even taken the bag to soft play either. And I turned up with a newborn baby with nothing on me, and a child that had a broken nose. It was just, I mean, even then alarm bells were definitely ringing. My mum had ended up getting in touch with Mike and my brother, and they both turned up at the A&E just to make sure just to find out what was going on. And I mean, they were just a few examples of erratic things that I was doing. And I guess after that point, it got to about, I think I was about 5 weeks postpartum. And I just went through the biggest drop I've ever been to. And it was like it was the time before, but it was so much more serious. At this stage, I didn't want to die alone. Theo was going to die with me. I had no bond with Max whatsoever. I mean, I would leave Max in a car seat outside the front of my house all day and hope someone would just come and take him away from me, because I couldn't look after him. I couldn't. I used to drop Theo off at school and I would forget to pick him up, and his teachers would have to walk him home. Like, it was just, I wasn't able to be with my children, really. I couldn't look after them. And the team were very, very aware of it. And I ended up having psychiatrists come to my house a couple of times a week at least. I was still on medication, but the medication wasn't working, and it was just getting bad. There was a lot of talk about hospital, and I remember saying, nope, I'm not going to hospital. I don't need to go in a loony bin. I remember even saying those words. I don't need to go there. And but I knew that this time was make or break, basically. I had decided that the 12th of March was going to be the day that I died, and it was going to be the day that Theo died. I picked our trees that I was going to use. I got everything ready for it. And I remember the day. I'll just briefly go through the day, because it was the most surreal day ever. And I knew I was going to die that day. So what do you do on the last day you're going to live? Like, you just, but you don't feel very well. So it's a bit, I didn't know what to do. So I remember ringing my mum and saying to her, I'm not having Max today. And she was like, that's fine, I'm taking him from you. So my mum took Max. She said, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I'm going to go spend my money. And I thought, I've got a bit of money in my bank account, but obviously I don't need it tomorrow. So I'm just going to buy random stuff. So I went down to Bicester Village and I bought the most random things you'd ever think about. Like, I bought makeup that weren't even the right colour for me. I bought a load of Jo Malone candles. I bought a load of dresses in Reese that didn't even fit. They weren't even my size when I look back at it now. I bought a load of mugs. I just went mad. I just spent every penny in my bank account and just bought loads and loads of stuff that I didn't need. And I went to see my friend Sarah because I needed to get rope. And I knew that Seth, her husband, was a carpenter and he probably would have some. And I remember going in there and I sat down and she said, do you want a cup of tea? And I said, no, it's going to be a quick stop. Yeah. And she was like, okay, what do you need? And I sort of didn't really want to say anything to her, but I needed to get to her shed because I knew she was one of the girls, she was one of my friends that I let in throughout the whole time. So she was very, she was very aware of how I was feeling and what was going on. And I basically looked at the trees in her neighbour's garden and I just was staring at them and I said to her, those trees are terrible. The branches are so flimsy, like you couldn't do anything on those trees. And with that, she just burst into tears. She wouldn't let me go to the shed at all. And I ended up leaving. Within about 10 minutes, I left and I was quite upset with her. And I didn't know this straight away, but as soon as I left, she rang the perinatal team, the psychiatrist, to say to them, someone needs to go and see her. She is very, very, very ill and she is on the cusp of committing suicide. And I went and got Theo home. I went and got Theo from nursery. And I thought to myself, I could just drive my car into the bridge, because I knew someone had done that before. And I read a lot about how people killed themselves around my area who had done, and this was one of the ways. But in my mind, the trees were so significant, and I couldn't let the trees down. So I had to end life with the trees, and I picked them. So they were too close together. I could get Theo up, and then I could then get up. I planned it all out, and I thought, no, I can't. And my mum rang me just in the car to make sure that I'd picked Theo up, and I cried like I've never cried before. I was like a child again, and I just sobbed. And I just said to her, she said to me, what is going on? Where are you? I told her where I was, and I said, I'm going to kill Theo, and I'm going to kill myself, and no one can stop me. And she just, I don't know what, she just became this very assertive person, and she made me get home. She got Theo, and she said to me, hospital is not an option anymore.
Yeah.
I will get you sectioned, or you can go voluntary. You are not staying here anymore. And I rang them, and I agreed with her. I said to her, this needs to happen. And so I spoke to the team, and they said they'd had a couple of calls about me that day. I told them what my plan was, and that I needed to die today, and I needed Theo to die today. And they said that I would not be allowed to stay at home, and if I did, I would be sectioned. I would be forcibly removed from my home. So I said to them, that's fine. I need to go to a mother and baby unit, whereby they look after mums and babies. For mums who've got mental health problems during pregnancy and the first year of postnatal. And the only bed they had available was in Leeds. So that night, my brother drove me and Mike and Max to Leeds. And this was just before lockdown of last year. So this was literally 2 weeks before, I think, or a week, just over a week, I think. Yeah. The timing's a bit muddled around them, but I remember I had a couple of visitors. So as in you came to see me, and I had a couple of other friends come, and Mike came with Theo and my mum and my friend Sarah, and then lockdown happened. Yeah. And I couldn't have anyone come.
I was your last visitor, I remember. It was the Sunday, and we went to lockdown on the Monday.
That's it. Yeah, exactly right. You were my last visitor.
And not only you had lockdown, you were in a mother and baby unit, you couldn't have any visitors. It must have just been so hard.
It was really, it was hard, but it was also,
I remember you saying it made it a little bit easier in a way. Right?
Yeah, it was the best thing that could have happened, because I think as well, I just needed time to bond with Max, and I needed time on my own, and I needed time away from my friends and family, like no disrespect, but I needed time to be with the doctors and try and rebuild my life again. But when I got there, I remember being really quite bitter and angry about the fact that they wouldn't let me die today. And I said to them, I was like, this is the day. Like, I don't know what I can do. Like, I just don't understand. I couldn't touch Max, really. I found it very difficult to carry him and hold him. And they just said to me, we will get you better. You will see the light and you'll get there. And I remember looking at them and saying, the only light I'm going to see is the light of heaven. Like, literally, I said, that's the only light that I need. And I don't think I'll ever get better, because I've lived like this now for so long.
So what is almost a year for you now at this point, hasn't it?
It is, yeah. So actually, I looked at my time hop, and it was a year today that I had my first home visit.
You were living with from 26 weeks pregnant until Max was 4 months, right?
Yeah. So
that's almost a year. You've had all these issues and all these thoughts. So it must be so hard to see that you could live without it.
Absolutely, exactly right. And especially when something like this takes hold of you, it's so hard to escape. Like it's so hard to learn how to live with it, you know. And I
What would
think as well,
be your advice for anyone who feels like they might be experiencing some thoughts like this? What could they do? Where could they go? Who could they talk to?
yeah, no, absolutely. So depending on if you are in pregnancy or postnatal, then
We did speak about the stats as well, didn't we? It's actually really high stats.
They are, yes. So 1 in 5 actually will experience postnatal or antenatal depression, and 1 in 100 will experience postpartum psychosis.
And that's what you had.
Yes, well, I had a bit of both, so I had it all because I had the voices in my head, and yeah, and then obviously the postpartum anxiety, depression.
So really, the chances of somebody listening to this knowing somebody that might have it is really high, or having been through it themselves.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. So there's so much support out there. I mean, there's still not enough awareness about it, I don't think, because ultimately you do these lovely baby groups and these sort of NCT classes that are so prepped to get you ready for your baby, but nobody sits down and says to you, 1 in 5 actually get postnatal depression, and they will struggle, and it's so high, and there needs to be more awareness about it, because ultimately you're entering what should be the happiest time of your life, and for some people it's just not. And I was very lucky that I had the support of the perinatal team and my consultant and my family and my friends, but I see how people can slip through the net, and how some ladies don't make it out of that. It's postnatal depression is the highest rate of death for the majority of young women, I read somewhere. And also it's such an acute and aggressive illness that it comes on so quickly. It's not like a different form of, like a normal form of depression. It's so much stronger.
And also I feel like, because you have never had, you would not have expected you as a person to become like this, so the change is so extreme for that reason, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, my friends and family didn't recognize me. They didn't recognize me when they actually saw me during that period, and there were only very few people that actually saw me during that time. They couldn't recognize me. They just I just lost confidence. I lost everything. And still, I mean, I lived in the unit. So in Leeds, I lived there for 6 weeks, and then I was moved to Watford, to another mother and baby unit, which was a little bit closer to home. But I was watched 24 hours a day for the first 3 weeks of my stay in Leeds, because, I mean, it's quite horrible to say, but I used to want to smother Max in his sleep. Like, I was still so unwell. I was so ill. They couldn't trust me. They couldn't trust me to go into the bathroom by myself, because I could potentially try and hang myself from the shower. It was such a big thing. And I remember being moved rooms, and then they decided not to, because there was a potential where you can hurt yourself in there. And I was just too high risk. At that point. And
the mother and baby unit, for anyone listening, like, more than likely hasn't been, what was it like being in there? Because, I mean, obviously I've been, so my image is like the living room and the kitchen, and it felt fairly normal, not like what you would maybe think this would be like. You know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was unlike, I mean, I've never been to a mental health hospital before, so I don't know what a sort of a traditional psychiatric unit looks like. I mean, I can only describe what I see in the films, but the mother and baby unit is like it's like your home in a sense. So as Rach said, it's you've got the kitchen, you've got a dining area, you have a living room, you have like a room where you can like play with the babies, like there's like a playroom and stuff, and you have your bedroom. It's so they try and make it as less as unclinical as possible for you, so you don't feel like you're actually in a
that's something that surprised me as well, like coming to visit, I wasn't sure what to expect, and like you say, it's only something you see in films, and that is actually very different to the reality of it. So although obviously it's very, very scary to go through, it is a nice place where you've got some excellent support and you were able to get better. So you would obviously say to somebody, you would advise to do this.
Oh my goodness, completely. They are such wonderful units. And like I said, when I first went in there, I had no hope. There was no hope inside me whatsoever. And I left after a 3-month stay feeling like a completely different person. And this sounds a bit cheesy, but on that day that I went in, I do feel that something did die inside of me. Like I do feel that something died, but something else was reborn, and I feel like such a better person from experiencing something like this, in the sense that I've come through, and
it can only make you grow as a person, really, can't it?
Absolutely. You become so much, yeah, exactly. You become so much more insightful, patient. Your awareness is so much better for other people around you, for yourself. And I think, like we were saying before, things that used to matter, these tiny little things that used to matter, aren't really, they don't really matter. It's the important things that you end up, that sort of the little and important things that you value the most. And I mean, it was a
go on.
No, go on.
I was going to say, I think people are probably going to be wondering, how are you now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been discharged from the unit and the perinatal team. I am still taking medication. I'm on different medication now, but it's helping so much more. I have a new job, so I work now, full-time job for BT, which is lovely.
Amazing to be able to say this after it's only been a year since you were even into the mother and baby unit. So this is amazing. It's just such good progress.
It really is. I'm also now a volunteer tutor at the Recovery College in Oxford. So what I do is I now help people with their mental health, and I co-tutor on courses, and I meet so many different people through that. And it's just been so rewarding. Like I said, I just volunteer, but it's something that I feel I can try and give back, because I got so much help and support. And if I can even just try and shed some of my experience to other people and help them, then it's all worth it,
So if somebody felt like they might be experienced postnatal depression or something like that, or they weren't feeling quite right during their pregnancy, what would you suggest they do straight away? Is there somewhere online, or would they ring their doctor?
Yes, so I would strongly advise to firstly be so open about how you're feeling, regardless of how horrible the thoughts you're having, or how silly you may think it feels. But be open, talk about everything, talk about your feelings, make sure somebody is aware of that, and ultimately speak to your doctor. There are so many different sort of areas that you can go down. There's Mind have a really good maternal sort of page. As I said, each district have their own perinatal team as well, so just look into that. And then in the perinatal team, there'll be psychologists, support workers, so many wonderful people that can help you and that are so experienced with this type of
people
illness.
want to help as well. Like you say, you're volunteering now and you're sharing your story now. Like, you want to help other people because you can see you can get better.
Oh, definitely. And there is light at the end of the tunnel. And I didn't believe it, but there is. I can honestly say.
I'm really happy to feel better, obviously, because you're my friend. Also, I'm so thankful that, you know, you're up for sharing this story now. And I really hope, you know, somebody might take something from it. But if anyone has any questions, I mean, you're probably going to be happy to answer them, aren't you? So you could DM our remedy, and then I'll pass it on to Maria and she'll be in touch. Just in case anyone had any questions. Yeah,
no problem. Lovely. Well, thank you so much, Rach.
Thank you so much for coming on, Maria. Honestly, it's been really lovely. Like, it's an emotional story, but I have heard it before, so I've only teared up a little bit this time. But yeah, like, it's amazing that you've shared that. So thank you so much for coming on.
No problem. Thank you.
End of recording now.